Welcome back to Guff Stuff Weekly. My name is Guff,
I'm Javen.
and this week we're talking about something.
I want to talk about the post-apocalypse, the open GL nightmare, the Pinkertons.
Oh God,
I want to talk about Wizards of the Coast and what they have done to rectify the open GL scandal, to regain the trust of the players, and to improve the platform of D&D Beyond.
There's two different things going on here.
But it all kind of rolls in. It's they're making changes.
They are making changes.
Some for the good, some I would argue not for the so good.
Right, I would agree.
But at the end of the day, they're attempting to make improvements, and it's
better than what they were
better
doing.
than stagnating like they were doing.
Right.
So, what do you want to talk about first?
I like to get the negatives out of the way.
Okay, so negatives.
They're stupid. No, Wizards of the Coast, I think, is a okay company. I think that I don't like where they went with Fifth Ed. I don't like that they tried to politicize everything, make everything, for lack of better words, woke. I don't know if that makes any sense.
It does. I think the politicization of it makes a lot more sense because at the end of the day, it seems to me like it wasn't a preemptive thing, it was a response to something.
Right.
Which is kind of funny because even TSR had a history of doing that.
Right.
When they had the Satanic Panic back in the 80s and 90s, there, for those who don't know, back in the 80s and 90s, it was kind of taboo to play Dungeons and Dragons in the eyes of some certain denominations of the Christian church.
Right.
A fair amount, I think, is a safe way to put it, but definitely the more hard-nosed, hard-lined denominations of the Christian faith. And one of the big things that they did in second edition to kind of rectify that was they changed the names. There was no longer devils and demons.
Okay.
They no longer called them devils and demons. They actually renamed them to Beatezu and Tinnerai.
Okay.
And rather than the Nine Hells, they called it Beator. And the Abyss was still the Abyss, and that's where the demons come from.
Right.
So D&D has a history of like aligning with public opinion.
Right.
But in the next edition that came out in third edition, they went back to Devils and Demons, and to this day they're still called Devils and Demons.
Right.
So it makes me wonder how much of it is a quote unquote like phase, because D&D has a history of going through phases of trying to appease people,
right?
And trying to appeal to people. And so I feel like it's probably just a phase.
Ooh, there we go. Getting out there.
And like, don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with making a game more inclusive. But when the sole purpose of what you're doing isn't to improve the quality of the game, but to appease a group of people,
right? Yeah,
I feel like you're going the wrong direction.
That's where I would have my biggest problem is
because at the end of the day,
picking a game that's run. Okay, so we got to look back at D&D, and it's primarily played initially by white males back in the day. I mean,
yeah, I mean that
was the middle working.
It was played by, yeah.
It was generally the middle working white class people that played it. It wasn't. I'm not saying that the minorities didn't play, and they play so much more now.
Yeah.
And then you move forward into history, and you get all other races, classes, genders, whatever, playing, and that's fine. But you should not, in my humble opinion, go take stuff that's historically a certain way, like orcs are bad, drow are bad, and say, okay, well now they're all good because we have to play nice with the people who don't want bad things.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, like historically, there has been one good drow in all of D&D,
right?
And he even skirts the line a lot of times.
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely.
Chris Stewart.
Yep.
But to make a character from an inherently evil race you know, it's kind of interesting to me. Like it's a weird like you wouldn't take the Starship Troopers bugs and try to sympathize with them.
No, right, exactly.
Like that's not the purpose of the setting.
Right,
Like it's also good to have a clearly defined bad guy.
right,
And if it's orcs, if it's I mean like kobolds, no one's saying anything about kobolds, no one's saying anything about dragons.
right.
Well, we had good dragons, but it seems very interesting to me that you're trying to just rather than having defined lines of like what is right and wrong in the game.
Right.
This has nothing to do with our culture.
Right.
But if you can't see an orc that's going around and murdering and pillaging and raiding villages, it's like a Viking, right?
Right.
Like you look at a Viking and you're like, okay, that's a bad guy.
Right.
Like there's nothing good about the Vikings really,
Right.
other than like some might glorify the warrior culture or the whatever. But at the end of the day, they go out
They're
and
raiders
they
and
raid and
pillagers,
pillage.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's literally what
And
they were.
and like that's kind of what the orcs were.
Right.
But now it's like, oh, well, not all orcs are bad. But even in the older editions, they had lawful good orcs.
Right. Right.
There was certain like sects of orcs that broke off. It was not the norm.
Right.
And so it made the lore a lot more interesting. Where now, if everything's just kind of gray area, it makes it hard as a player. Like if you're playing Skyrim and you walk around, you see a red bar above somebody's head, you know they're an enemy.
Right. Yeah, you just know it.
And that's a clearly defined thing for players to do.
Right.
And in a game like D&D where combat is of the utmost importance, don't get me wrong, it's still a role-playing game,
Right.
but the game is designed around combat and good versus evil.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's kind of where you get that hero mentality.
Right.
All your characters are heroes. Now you could have the anti-hero characters or the
Evil characters,
predominantly
whatever.
campaign, whatever. But that's all part of what we could do as, in my humble opinion, this is my humble opinion, leave as is. And we've always done this in our campaigns from day one to now. They don't, like, when you open up the cover of the book, the first thing it says is just guidelines.
Yeah, this is just guidelines.
And so if you want to have, like, I made a whole world where, goblins were the primary, goblins, kobolds, bugbears, they were all the predominant races, and humans and elves, they were all like the secondary
Citizens.
yeah. Like the dogs of the world, kind of like what you generally treat goblins and kobolds.
Yeah.
And but you can just do that. We don't have to have books out there telling us that, if we have this, and yeah, maybe I'm just nitpicking a little bit, but when they change their text of all their books to say that this is this,
yeah,
like they never said that the orcs were bad in the D&D in the books themselves. It was just kind of presumed because the orcs were the villains. Like,
well, I guess that's partially true. I don't want to actually here.
Well, I mean
but in the monster manuals, they were labeled as
right. Well, right.
Evil.
But like during some of the campaigns and stuff that we've had, they don't necessarily say all orcs are bad in the books. Sometimes they do have good. I shouldn't even use orcs. Just the monsters aren't all bad.
But I mean, to be fair, like the drow or the drow, some people call them. I don't understand that, but drow. It specifically states in the monster manual that they're evil.
Right.
They're just evil. The whole race is a matriarchal society.
Right.
That is just all about killing and worshiping Lolth and literally just debauchery and evil.
Right.
Now there are certain actors in that race that have broken free, and it's a struggle every day of their life. Like Driss Do'Urden,
yeah,
he has to look at the sunrise every morning and force himself to like go through that pain,
right?
So that he can like realize, hey, I'm not this thing anymore.
Yeah,
and that inner turmoil is what really drives good characters.
Oh no, absolutely.
But if everything's just gray goop and porridge,
it kind of takes away the whole like.
It takes away motivation, in my opinion.
Well, and I guess even the whole politically correct thing, the other thing that would really bother me is not every player, not every DM, not every player has that open imagination to just create their own world, right?
Right.
And so if you make it complicated on them, you make it a brand new player, you have the starter set, which by the way is really good. I've always liked
The Fendelver.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've always liked that one. But if you make the starter set, you make the rules confusing. Like if you don't define good, bad, evil for a new player, when they're getting into Dungeons and Dragons, the first thing they're thinking is, "Oh, hey, we're gonna play and we're gonna go out and save the world." But if you don't make that, there's defined good and bad, it just gets confusing.
And I mean, I know we talk about it all the time on this channel, but look at Baldur's Gate 3. They did an amazing job of showing that even though something might be evil, you can
Right.
still like make deals with it and work with it.
Right.
With the different devils in there,
Right.
with the giant ogres
Yeah.
that you can
Yep.
pay to help you. Like money is their motivator, so they're selfishly motivated.
Yeah, absolutely.
But Baldur's Gate 3 didn't really sugarcoat anything. It kind of just gave you the system and gave you the setting
Right.
as it was.
And honestly, if you're creating a system out there, that's what you should give us. Give us a system. Some people don't have the creativity to make their own right and wrongs. Give us the right and wrongs, or the goods, the bads,
Yeah.
and just let us do what we want with it.
Well,
Like-
another great example of this is that I talk about it every once in a while, but
Yep.
the Palladium Systems Rifts,
Right.
the Rifts role playing game, has guys that are basically Nazis. Like they're
Right.
essentially Nazis in the post-apocalypse. It's
Right.
and they're called the Coalition, and they kill all mutants, all abominations, everything like that. It's kind of got like a 40K vibe to it, but they're clearly the bad guys because they're like, oh, if you're a mutant, we're gonna you're a second-class citizen, and we're gonna
Right.
just murder you if you're not useful to us. And so it's a very clearly defined bad guy. So imagine if they take that and say, well, they're not necessarily bad.
Right.
And it's like,
yeah, then it's all of a sudden, wait,
Yeah.
what? Why?
But Rifts does that. They let you play as the Coalition. You can play as Coalition members,
Right.
but you typically do that in a Coalition campaign, and you have a very clearly defined. You are the bad guys,
Right.
And you're playing a bad guy campaign,
Right. Yep. No, I like the clear defined boundaries. I don't like we gotta appease everyone boundaries. I don't think that helps anybody in
Well,
long
and
term.
it makes for nice storytelling too, because if you meet a Coalition guy, let's say in the Rifts game,
Right.
or let's go back to Dungeons and Dragons. Let's keep it simple.
Yep.
You meet an orc who doesn't immediately want to kill you.
Right.
Well, now all of a sudden you're like, wait, something's wrong here. And now you have a whole adventure hook, and it makes for an interesting and compelling
Oh
story.
yeah. I know when I had my guys in my campaign when they ported over to the other place, the first city they come across, they found a human outside the city. They hadn't been in the city yet. The city had walls or whatever else,
Mhm.
and the human had a collar on and was digging in the ground and just acting Neanderthalic.
Yeah.
Foraging for. And they're like, "Hey, come here, let's talk." And the human didn't have any good verbal language, and they were all like, "What's going on?" And then a goblin come outside. Hey, good language wasn't guttural, wasn't. And there was a little guttural just because of the way they're built. But
Yeah.
what are you doing out here? What? What are you? They're all we had a mixed race, so it was kind of confusing to the goblin.
Yeah.
It wasn't just pure humans, and the players weren't sure what the heck to do at that point. They were like, "Let's run." Like,
But I think about how they're kind of. I just like to call it like porridging or oatmealing.
Yeah.
They're making it very bland.
yeah, no, right,
And you would never have had systems like Dark Sun exist.
right,
The whole campaign setting for Dark Sun was about this, and even Planescape, and some of the other big net Birthright.
right.
All of these had very, like, halflings were cannibalistic, evil little monsters in Dark Sun.
Right now they're just cute little furry.
But that was Dark Sun. That was their setting.
Right.
They were feral, they were cannibals, they were just absolutely just nightmarish folk. And elves in that setting were extremely tall, fairly muscular, but not like super built.
Right.
And they were nomadic tribesmen, basically.
Interesting. We're forest dweller tree huggers.
Right.
Nice.
And like you had all of these different. It basically flipped the script on the whole narrative, and it made for a really fun setting to play in. But as you try to homogenize everything,
Right.
I feel like it detracts from the game in the long run.
So, with that said, and all what we've been talking about, what do you think the root cause is of why did Wizards of the Coast go this way, and basically ruin their D&D Beyond platform
So that
and all this other stuff? Like, why do you think they went down this road? And
So
Why did it take so long for them to turn around?
I think like you said initially is that it is
Yep.
possible. It is two different issues,
Right.
and I don't know if it stems from the same problem. I think it stems from two different problems. I think the homogenizing and oatmealing, porridging of the content has to do with the same thing that happened in the 80s with the Satanic Panic. That's why I opened with that, is that there is a history of them doing something
Yep.
like this, of taking something that is abrasive to a culture or a specific group of people.
Right.
In our case, it was the church in the 90s, and
Right.
flipping the script a little bit to make it more appealing to everybody.
Right.
But at the end of the day, they just went back to what they did originally because it
Well,
was too confusing for people to remember.
right. That too.
Oh, this is the Payetay.
That too,
Is it a devil, a demon? I don't know what any of this
if you
is.
flip the script, you're yeah, well, you're making it confusing. I mean, it's
And
just
that-
absolutely
and-
not sticking to your guns. I think personally, long term, most people appreciate something that just, hey, we're gonna do it. We're gonna do it. Look at Rockstar Games.
Yeah.
They give everybody the big bird. They don't care.
Yep.
They do what they want, and they're one of the best selling
They're just
companies in the world.
extraordinary because they care more about compelling characters, compelling stories.
Even if they're not, even if they are politically wound up,
Yeah.
they just don't care. They just want to go where, at least in that instance of what we're initially talking about.
Well, and look at
The
Baldur's
launch
Gate
night.
3.
Yep.
Another great example. They stuck to the original D&D guns.
Right.
And it paid dividends.
Yeah.
Like, that game is so well loved.
Yeah.
There are people that complain about it. You know,
Yeah.
But I remember we were looking at someone complaining that people were modding the characters to make them more attractive. Whatever. People are gonna do what they're gonna do.
What's wrong with the burning
Who-
tiefling? Come on.
Who cares?
She's hot in her own way.
Who cares? What I do at my house, who cares?
Right. Exactly.
Like at the end,
Exactly.
who cares? It's
Right.
and this is a whole other. We have a
no,
whole,
that.
we have
right.
a whole other podcast we talk
Yep.
about this stuff on. But so to get to the
Secondary issue.
to get to the secondary issue, D&D Beyond, most of that was an outcry from the OpenGL,
which was
we've talked about already
Yep.
on a different podcast.
Yep.
But just to recap, Wizards basically pulled a Unity and said we're gonna charge you for using our stuff.
But to be fair, it was probably not Wizards directly influencing that decision.
It was
I would
probably the
say
higher
that.
ups at Hasbro.
Yeah, because right before that, a bunch of people had quit D&D Beyond because they lost control over what they could and could not do.
Yep.
And then we kind of have an idea why now, because Hasbro, the parent company, was and is a giant
Conglomerate. Yeah, it's just
it's all about shareholders and the top dollar.
And
And
we've talked about this in video games how many times?
all the time.
All the time.
It's ridiculous.
It's the decision of the suits affecting
they know nothing about what's going on down here.
And it's sad because at the end of the day, they are going to make more money in the short term if they jack up the prices, do whatever. But in the long run, it's gonna kill the revenue stream.
Right. Yeah. Sadly, it's gonna be a. I think that's what's ultimately the biggest choice between D&D Beyond and even some of the woke political stuff that they try to change. I honestly think it has something to do with the parent company Hasbro making stock shareholder decisions. Because if I'm a shareholder in a company, I have say 10% of Hasbro stock. I have a pretty big say in what goes in that company.
Yeah.
Like 10% is a lot of shares in one company, especially when you're that big. And I call up the board of directors and say, hey, I'm going to dump my 10% on the market right now and watch your stocks plummet, or you guys are going to hire a rainbow haired colored whatever it is, and they're going to go ahead and change all that. And if I'm Hasbro, I'm like, well, it's our job to make sure that, we get our shareholders the best money they can. So that's what you do. You do what the guy who has the money tells you. And I think with D&D Beyond, that's what happened with the OGL. I think that was all Hasbro testing the market to see what would happen if they said we're going to microtransaction everything.
And I want to put the distinction here. I don't think we're tying the inclusivity stuff with the
No, I'm not
shareholder
trying. No,
stuff.
I'm not trying to do that. No.
Yeah, I want to make that distinction.
No, it was. I
'cause-
was just using a generic example.
yeah,
I'm not trying to say that's exactly the cause. Just saying that when you start having shareholders making decisions for something on something they knew nothing about,
yeah,
and you're telling the people ahead of Wizards of the Coast they have to do things, but it's like listening to congressmen talk about the internets. And how does
yeah.
that one signal get from your phone to
Yeah.
your computer?
It's people
just
people trying to base business decisions on an industry that they know very little about.
right. And when you start doing that, then you start that's ultimately I think where the OGL changes started coming from. Is everybody's like, well, EA did microtransactions,
Yeah,
so
or Unity's doing
yeah,
this, but
Unity, so we should do it too.
but the thing is, so many people, well, a lot of them were looking at Apple. They're like, well, look what Apple does, you
Right.
know.
Well,
And now all of that is coming apart. Apple's getting sued.
right.
Unity got absolutely blasted.
Oh yeah.
OGL for D&D. I mean, how many of the people like Kobold Press are like, well, we'll just make our own game now, or Critical Role, we'll just make our own system now.
I think
They're literally just like they're pulling out because
I would say there's probably 50 new systems that came out in a period of like a few months.
because people were like, we're not going to deal with
No,
it.
we don't want to deal with that. We don't want to deal with the political garbage. We don't want to deal with the money garbage on top. We just want to have a game we can play.
Yeah.
But now, because we've been ragging on these guys so bad, I think we should go ahead and talk positive for a bit.
So one of the few things, or not few things, but one of the positive things I will say about Wizards and D&D Beyond is that they've done a very good job of releasing quality free content
Right.
through adventures.
Yep.
The most recent one was the Last Caverns of Socanth.
Yes.
Shokanth,
Yeah, whatever you want. However you want to pronounce it.
Shokanth, whatever.
A TS something.
Yeah.
Not supposed to be English.
But it's a reboot of an old classic first edition adventure written by Gary Gygax.
Yep.
So they're paying homage to the guy that made the game, just
Yep.
like they did with Tomb of Annihilation.
Yep.
They're like, look, this was really good, and this is a fan favorite. Let's officially put it into 5th Ed
Right.
and give it to everybody for free.
Yeah, no, that's really cool.
And it's a show of like trust because D&D Beyond's like, we're gonna give you everything for free for this.
Yeah.
We hope you use it for D&D,
right.
you know, rather than port it over into Kobold Press or
Right.
Privateer Press, where whoever's making whatever.
Yeah.
The other thing they started doing on D&D Beyond is I noticed recently they added Kobold Press books. They put Humblewood on there. So
Yeah.
they're taking
third party.
third party developers and publishing their content on the official D&D.
Yeah, I don't think Humblewood has anything to do with 5th Ed, does it?
I think it's based in
Is
5th
it?
Ed.
Okay.
Like 5th Ed is
Or
the
at
core
least
it's like a
loosely.
hacked
Okay.
5th Ed. Kind of like the Kobold Press books are
Right.
all
Yeah. Well, that.
for 5th Ed.
Right. Yep.
So it's just a really it shows good savviness on their part. The other thing I've liked that D&D Beyond and Wizards have done is they've brought back some of the fan favorite settings. I mean,
Yeah.
look at Dragonlance.
Yep.
Look at
Spelljammer.
Spelljammer. Look at Planescape.
Yep.
They did the Planescape box set, and now they've added Quest from the Infinite Staircase is coming out soon.
Nice. Yeah, I actually.
And that's one of my favorite
Yep.
mega modules or story anthologies was the Infinite Staircase.
Right.
Such a good story. It has to do with a lot of demi-planes and not like very normal visited places.
Right.
And it's just really cool. But I mean, they've done a good job of, at the very least, trying to rectify what they've done. They didn't jack up the prices of their subscription service
No.
like they said they were
I
going
think it
to.
actually went down. I'm not 100%
Yeah,
sure.
I'm pretty sure they went down. Well,
I
they lost over half
resubscribed
their
because my
subscribers.
players wanted me to resubscribe so they could be part of our campaign groups again and make characters off of it. And I'm pretty sure it was cheaper than it was the first time I subscribed.
Yeah,
I might be wrong, but
it's. I want to say for the cheapest. Oh, I can look it up here quick. The other thing I like about it is that you can link it to your Twitch, and so if you ever stream D&D,
yeah,
you can have your character sheets and all
have
that.
overlays all
Yeah.
that on there. Yep.
It's about $2.17 a month for the basic tier, and about $5 a month for the master tier. But they were talking like $30 a month at one point.
Yeah, at one point they were throwing just crazy numbers out.
Yeah,
And it's
then
like, holy
I believe
smokes.
you also get access to some of the virtual tabletop tools.
Yeah, they've started doing a lot of that where they have like fog of war maps, and that's pretty like.
Which is something I always thought they should have leaned into a little harder
Right.
to begin with, because Roll20 and Fantasy
Fantasy
Ground,
Grounds and a lot of the other
a
ones.
lot of the other ones
Been
were
doing that for
so successful with
oh
virtual tables, and that's one of the first episodes we did too,
yeah
was virtual tabletops.
yeah you know, and
So why not
just embrace it?
why not
Go
make
with
a
it.
proprietary software?
Right.
You want to talk about exclusivity and
Right.
proprietary
Yeah.
software? Make a better virtual tabletop
Yeah.
than your competitors.
Exactly. I mean, who has more money? You think about it. Hasbro, Wizards of the Coast, or a small company like Roll20 or Fantasy Grounds?
And it's crazy too.
I mean,
Roll20 did it brilliantly, in my opinion.
and pretty
with
cheaply.
with it was all basically
Right.
open source.
Yep.
Not quite open source, but basically open source.
Right.
You could go in and you could edit character sheets, make form fillable stuff on their API and all that stuff. It was a super smart idea.
Yeah. No, it was wonderful.
And then if you want a microtransaction, all of a sudden you can start selling virtual dice and
Which
cosmetic stuff,
Yep.
which some
people love that stuff.
Some people love that.
Yeah. No.
There's nothing wrong with that. So
No.
I mean, at the end of the day, and then you can put all your maps on there. You can link it to
the map function
the source books.
It's really kind of tears me because I like Fantasy Grounds. I haven't run a lot of campaigns in it, but I have used their map systems a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But if D&D Beyond's already going to do the map system, like it's smooth. I've played with it a little bit. It's pretty smooth. You put up a map, you can fog a war, and then I had another person sitting over there on another computer logged into it, and you can put up a full map. It's all fog of war. And then you just like if you're going down a hallway, you just clean off the hallway for them.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point, they're supposed to add like line of sight and all that other stuff, which is crazy.
Which is features that are on most of the other.
Yeah, which is already on other, but that's something D&D Beyond is finally like whatever Wizards of the Coast was going through with Hasbro, they finally hashed out their differences to some extent. Or Wizards is just like, hey, we're gonna do this. I'm sorry, you can't keep running all of our customers away.
Mm-hmm.
This is not how we make money.
Well, and the other great thing too is with D&D Beyond is the fact that all the source material is super, like the way they do it is super nice. Because you can access everything. It has hyperlinks within all the contents. You can click on something. It'll bring up the rules. It's just really nice. I mean,
it is.
It's great.
Well, yeah. So I all in all, they made some big mistakes. And they paid for it, and they're still paying for it, and they're going to pay for it for many years to come. Because I know
they lost the trust. I
think
issue.
The biggest thing they lost was the trust. Yeah, but I think they also lost a lot of people that are just not buying their books. Like there's talks of them maybe not producing hard books anymore to some extent because they've just lost so many people. Their last few books they've sold didn't do well. They were just blowing them on Amazon for almost nothing.
Yeah,
and it's sad because I love all my hard books. I like to be able to hold them. I like digital too when I'm just sitting on the couch or I'm at home and I'm not at the store. Well, it's nice to whip out my phone or my laptop and just and I can read through it. But man, when you're in the store, there's nothing about like flipping open a book and just.
Well, I think what the major trouble was, and this has been true of every D&D edition, and the way that D&D functions, is that you need the 3 core books to play, and then after that, you really don't need anything.
Right. No, the rest is just
splurging.
fluff and
stuff.
But
they did a good job with. I will say, from a business standpoint, not necessarily from a consumer standpoint, but from a business standpoint. They did a really good job of making people want to buy Xanathars, making people want to buy Mordenkainen.
Oh, yeah.
Because it gave you options that you didn't have. And that's always been true of even when they were TSR. Even in first edition, you had the freaking...
they had Dungeon Magazine coming out where their alternate rules were even putting those things. The Dragon Magazine.
The Anti-Paladin was from a Dungeon Magazine or a Dragon Magazine from way back in the day that I used. And so, like, it's not like it's a new thing that they're doing.
No.
It's just that I feel like the quality of the content that they're producing isn't holding up anymore.
Right.
And people just aren't buying it.
Yeah.
Because there's just...
Well, I think with the release of like you said at the beginning, the release of the Lost Caverns
fatigue
is, I think that's going to help a lot.
I hope so. I hope people... And I've always wondered, too, why not pull into the archives and... Think about how successful Curse of Strahd was.
All the stuff
how successful Tomb of Annihilation was.
Yeah. Against the Giants.
And I get it. You want to write new stories. Like, I understand that completely. Tales from the Yawning Portal was also extremely successful.
Yeah.
I get you want to write new stories, but there's just a plethora of things that
Well-
you can, and they have done a good job of pulling into the archives.
Yeah.
Like they did the Expedition to Barrier Peaks.
Right.
They did the sequel to that in 5th Ed. They did the Lost Laboratory of Qualish,
Okay.
which was a sequel to one of the
Oh.
most fan favorite modules, Goofy modules. But why not do like Castle Amber?
Right.
Why not do some of the
Against
old
the Giants. and
against
stuff
the
like
giant?
that, yeah.
Exactly. Wrath of the Spider. If they did GD2,
Yeah, that whole
the mega module
Yeah, starting from Keep.
from the Keep
Or
on the Borderlands.
Let's Keep the first one, yeah.
Village of Hamlet, Keep on
Yeah.
the Borderlands, all the way
It's
through
all
to
the way down to the
layer
Drow.
the layer of the Spider
Yeah.
King. Yeah. So I mean, like, I feel like there's still hope for D&D and D&D Beyond,
Yeah.
but I think we're just seeing an ebb and flow, a cycle.
Yeah,
it's not like this hasn't happened before.
Someone just posted in the comments, it's new customers versus old customers, and it's a hard balance because old customers are the ones that have the money to buy all the stuff.
Yeah.
New customers are like, there's 300 systems to try, plus video games, plus
Yeah.
all these other
It's a
distractions. It's kind of like what's happening with Magic and Wizards of the Coast. I know this is a D&D, but people are getting fatigued. They're just
Yeah.
like,
There's so many
too much stuff coming out. It's just too much.
Yep.
So anyway, yeah, we've talked a lot about it, and sorry if it got political. I wasn't trying to make it political. I was just trying to explain how things are working and how I seen it working from my standpoint.
Yeah.
From an older generation person to a younger generation person.
And yeah, and again, like that's why I tried to state that
right
away that there is past precedent for this.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's not like this is a new thing that they're doing.
No, and I didn't like it back then either.
And if they try to pretend that this is something new that they're doing because they've done something wrong,
right,
they're 100% just blowing smoke up your butt because they've done this before.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and
it didn't work out for them before.
It was stupid back then, and it's stupid now. So just
it's just
stop.
It's the way it is, and it's unfortunate, but it's people trying to appeal and homogenize everything, and it just it detracts.
Yeah, no, it does.
And it's not like you can't write an interesting adventure where the orcs are the good guys.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. You have all the creativity.
But trying to change the fundamental structure of something that's been around for, 50 years now?
50 anniversary.
Yeah, trying to change the fundamental bone structure of something that's been around for 50 years.
Yeah.
If it's worked for 50 years, why change it?
Right. Yeah.
You don't reinvent the wheel.
You don't even think about it. I'm just as old as D&D.
Yeah.
I probably came on my birthday.
I'm
guessing I was spawned into this world. And Gary's like, "Hey, we got D&D going."
So is this like a
That's what happened.
Mark Twain thing with Haley's Comet?
Yeah, I think
he was born when Haley. Are you gonna die when D&D?
I'm guessing it.
When D&D dissolves.
This is bad. This is important, man. I gotta keep this going.
All right.
Yeah.
Anyways, thanks for listening. We'll catch you in the next one.
Yeah, next one.